Hello, everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of Rising Stars, and this one kind of an ad hoc one. I think you look at if you've looked at LinkedIn at all in the past week or so, you've seen this one topic kind of dominating. The way I'm looking at this, this Clover decision, has the potential to kind of change the stars world in a really dramatic way. In a time frame, we shall see. But we're digging in on this, and we've been spending a ton of time on all of this over the past week. Recalculating scores, running through numbers, trying to understand, the meaning behind it all. And so we're doing this episode today and kind of breaking it into three distinct parts. And for this first one, I'd like to get a lot of input from Jessica Assefa and Phil Collins and get their take on, just kind of breaking down what really is this, what happened, why did it happen? We'll jump into some other topics after this, but without further ado, why don't we jump right in? I think everybody probably knows you guys well. So why don't we jump in? Jessica, you want to give us kind of your view of
Yeah,
the overview here?
happy to. So it'll be a little recap for some folks and maybe new info for others, but in a nutshell, on May 27th, the U.S. District Court of Southern Georgia ruled that CMS properly included 20 measures in Clover's 2026 star ratings. Why the U.S. District Court of Southern Georgia? Per Clover, they're claiming that that's where the majority of their enrollees were harmed, so they chose to go through that district. It's 20 measures, but the case is kind of broken into two key parts. So the first part involves 10 measures, and it really challenges the legal foundation of the measures themselves. And for this, in the argument, Clover leaned into a statute that said star ratings must be based on data collected under CMS's quality improvement program. So basically, that means HEDIS, CAHPS, HOS. And the 10 measures that are being challenged through this part of the legal argument really are two Part C measures, which were slated for removal anyway in star year 2029, the reviewing appeals measures and the call center measures, and then about 8 of the Part D measures, which is most significantly mathematically impactful, which we'll get to in Part 2. But the majority of those, including the triple weighted medication adherence measures. And this is really the bigger deal section of the lawsuit, because CMS can't just fix this through rulemaking. To fix this, Congress would need to change the Medicare law itself to authorize CMS to use additional data sources beyond those that are called out in that certain statute. So that's part one. Part 2 involves a different reasoning and a different set of measures. So Part 2 involves something called the Administrative Procedure Act, or APA. And those of us that live in stars know this as the rulemaking process. So where CMS wants to add a measure or remove a measure or make a statistically significant change to a measure, they need to go through that notice, comment period, review the comments, and then make that change. And it puts that measure or those measures on a 2-year runway before they re-enter the star ratings program. Clover, through this second part of their argument, is saying that CMS was implementing and maintaining certain measures through the annual technical note, annual STARS tech notes and other regulatory documents versus going through that APA process and that formal rulemaking process. So this involves almost all of the HOS measures, about 4 HOS measures and 6 CAHPS measures, in addition to those 2 that were challenged in that first part, the statutory part. So we've got 20 measures total. Something interesting here to note is that CMS can fix this moving forward through the APA process. But Phil and Mick and I were chatting before this, and the question in our minds is, does that mean that these measures would then all have to go through that traditional notice and comment period, kind of putting them on that 2-year runway? And if yes, that makes that potentially a much bigger operational issue than just the 2026 star ratings. So there we are in a nutshell. Mick, Phil, anything you want to tack onto there?
I'll just jump in. Like I'll reference. There was a great post that Jen Kerfoot put out today, and so I'll reference a statement that she made here. None of us here are attorneys, and we are not practicing law in any way. So we're giving you
Yes.
insights, but it is just that. It is just that. And so, Phil, I'll pass it off. Any what would you add to what Jessica was saying?
No, I mean, I completely, Mick, you said it has a potential to shake the stars up, and it definitely does. And, all that just goes through my mind is, why now, right? We talked about before this too, we talked about why Clover challenged this now. These measures have been in the program for a while. Why hasn't a health plan brought this up before? And obviously, Mick referenced Jen Kerfoot's post. She goes into, the detailed explanation of Chevron and why the killing of that really leads to this, where CMS isn't really deciding on ambiguous definitions or meanings. And, it really seems, the last few years that we've been in stars, the star strategy is litigation now, not planning, which is totally joking. Don't take that. But it seems like we've gone a handful of years with some sort of
Every year.
massive
Yeah.
every little and let's not forget, this actually, if this goes through, this is the second litigation against stars. 25 was the cut points, rerunning the cut points, which I remember Mick and I being at a conference, and that decision came down, and we were ended up rerunning cut points, everybody's score with the new cut points.
Yeah.
So
and see, that was, to me, that's interesting. Frankly, it's kind of a wonderful thing for us on the sidelines, when this stuff happens, because then we get to jump in and run new numbers, and it does change the way the way you strategize, the way you plan. But I remember when that came out for the Stars 2024 cut point changes.
24, you're right, yeah.
And the comments was, well, CMS can still appeal everything, and then all of a sudden, it was like immediately, nope, no appeal. We're running with it. We're changing the game. And so then all of a sudden it was real. And that was kind of how I felt what could have happened here, because, I think I've learned some about some of the nuance, since then. But my initial reaction was, if the judge has ruled this way, and these seem pretty straightforward guidelines that were missed, for one reason or another, then rather than going through all of these different lawsuits, is there just going to be a very quick, all right, better of situation, now we'll go back, recalculate everybody, new reward factor thresholds, new scores, and now this is your official Stars 2026 rating, so I think there are a lot of different ways this could go.
I think that won't happen. I mean, we're all just saying what we think, right?
Yeah,
I think it won't play out that way. And I think that because those historical lawsuits like Tukey and those, even though they used the ability to operationalize some of that through the district court, due to the Loper turning over that Chevron difference, the cases were fundamentally different, right? Like those cases were challenging the order of operations of CMS's methodology and saying you didn't follow the order of operations that you had codified or that you had brought forth. This is really different. It's challenging CMS's authority to even dictate what measures can go into the star ratings program altogether or in the future. And that's really consequential and takes authority away from the agency permanently. And I just can't see them sitting by.
I definitely think
risk. Go ahead, Phil.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, I think it will be interesting what happens through the appeal. And we also have to remember that the appeals courts could come back and say, well, yes, you initially challenged 20, but actually here's 12, right? And
so many things could happen.
So many situations.
So many things could happen that we could talk about it for an hour, but I see our producer's face in the top left corner saying,
so we'll wrap here and we'll jump in on the numbers for the next piece. So Look forward to seeing you there.
Yeah.
See y'all soon. Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to part 2 of a 3-part series. And we're here on Rising Stars with Mick Twomey, Phil Collins, and myself, Jessica Assefa. Just to catch you all up, if you missed part 1, we've been talking about the Clover case, and as is everyone. We spent part 1 really talking about the what is it, right? What are the guts of that case, and how did it play out? And I'd encourage you to go find that if you haven't viewed that. Part 2, we're really going to dig into kind of the so what about it, right? What does that mean mathematically, right? What for the nation? What does that mean from a QBP perspective? What are the dollars maybe tied to that? And what does that mean from a star ratings perspective? And how does the math play out? I know, Mick, you and Phil have been digging into this for a while. I haven't seen the numbers yet. So along with all of you viewing, I'm going to have fun learning a little bit here today and turn it over to you guys.
All right. Thank you.
Awesome.
Anytime CMS either makes a change or now, something like this, a ruling comes out where the world could change, I get stupid levels of excited because, we can go run numbers and see what this means. Because typically it's going to mean a change in strategy. It's going to mean a change in the way you look at measures and how do we focus on things and where do we optimize. And from that perspective, this one did not disappoint. When let's take maybe from a global standpoint first, from an industry-wide standpoint. You look at how many plans changed. Again, we often don't look just at star ratings, but we look at scores. And I think some of that really starts to get interesting when you see like what a change like this would mean to the industry if it were pushed out broadly, like in a better of type situation. So we ran those numbers and actually just from a star rating standpoint, 130 plans, 130 contracts would see their star rating improve based on this. And so, within there, you're going to see aspects of, potentially rebate dollar improvements, and most importantly for a lot of folks, QBP improvements, right? Of those 130 contracts, 42 of them actually saw a jump from below 4 stars to above 4 stars. And those 42 contracts, when you apply kind of an estimate on QBP, you're looking at a $1.1 billion increase. Just incredibly meaningful. When this first came out, we ran numbers Friday to try to understand, what this impact was going to be. And, some of my favorite things is then you start getting texts and emails from clients and like, hey, have you guys seen this? Have you guys, can you done something? It's like, yep, we'll shoot you something over right now. And then that starts the discussion. It's kind of harkens back to the Tukey days, right? When we get requested to come in and meet with leadership teams and just kind of talk about, what all this means, but it's still open. There's still a lot of unknown, but again, a lot of what, Phil and I like to do in these situations is just what if. And so there are some other numbers that I'll share, but Phil, anything that you're thinking about?
No, I mean, the 130 contracts is huge. That 1.1 billion is huge. If that sticks, CMS, it's got to be a hurting on them. As Mick said, we love running these models. Him and I got so excited on Friday, talking to each other. And we can have something up in 30 minutes. Tell me what we need. Which, for anybody out there, we've ran these for all the contracts. So if you haven't reached out to us yet, make sure you do, because we can definitely give you your own individual's health plan's impact. We've got that ready to go. So I know we've gotten inundated with requests and meetings and all that stuff for this. So it's been good. We love when these things happen. But I mean, those and Mick's even ran some numbers on the QI change, right? Because that in itself is a big change. Right now, you're looking at about 6 points for every star rating you're able to increase for the Part C and Part D QI measures, right? So if you go from a 3-star to a 4-star in Part C or Part D, it automatically moves up your score by roughly 6 points. Mick, if all 20 measures are removed, what does that go to now?
If all 20 measures are removed, it goes to 12 points overall.
Wow.
Crazy.
I mean, it is crazy when you think about, how does that impact your strategy, right?
Right.
If all of a sudden, looking at these small incremental improvements. So, if you're not looking anymore at necessarily trying to get to that next star rating, but what do I need to do to just get to the significant improvement? Really changes the game. And I think that's a lot of the analysis that probably gets done as this kind of moves along, and then we get a formal final answer on here's what's going to happen. Because at that stage, now, all right, it's one thing to what it means in STARS 2026, something totally different to what it means in STARS 2028, where we're sitting today kind of midstream, right?
Mhm.
How do you, if it comes out and a lot of these changes or portion of these changes apply today, I think you have to step back from everything that you're doing and start all over again with target setting, because you have the benefit of knowing where you are sitting today, but even now more broadly, the benefit of knowing, all right, now how do I optimize, in these last 6 months of the year to really take advantage of the new rules? And again, I'm just talking from a number standpoint, from a star rating optimization standpoint. But I think it's going to really highlight things. We've had a lot of our clients, and frankly, a lot of not our clients, because they know we'll give them this stuff, reaching out to us lately and wanting to have talks about, what does this mean for us? And we ran some numbers. Let me take a look at this. We ran some numbers kind of across the board to see what was what some of these results were. And you look at the changes. So, again, there were 130 contracts that actually saw star rating improvements. But if you look at just the overall score improvements, it's almost 300 clients or 300 contracts out there. And I found this interesting. When you look at the range, we went and sorted these by, biggest impact down to essentially like 1 point difference. When you look at the contract that had the biggest difference, take a guess on which plan that might have been.
Devoted.
Devoted to that is actually a good choice. They were really high up. That's actually a good choice. And by the way, this is all public data that we're running, so we didn't just give anything.
Right.
Right.
But the one that had the biggest impact was Clover. And I just got a smile on my face when I looked at that and saw it. I wasn't necessarily expecting to see that. I think it's
That's a
interesting.
coincidence.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting, but it goes to, you've seen a bunch of posts about, are there other measures that potentially would get impacted on this? It was just these were handpicked, right? And that could play into this, because I found that very interesting, let's just say.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely is. The measures that were picked were interesting, and it's always validating, right? When you do some sort of analysis like that and you figure out why, something was challenged or not challenged, you're like, oh, okay, that's why.
Good work, hit you well. So, kudos.
Yeah.
And so, we've got a lot of, different numbers and analyses that we could share. And frankly, it's continuing to evolve. We're looking at now we're beginning to apply if these changes or some subset of these changes applied to the STARS 29,
Right.
changes coming down the pike. What does that do to you? So there are all kinds of different things to evaluate. Not enough time to do it today, but thankful for the time to at least share some initial insights. And as Phil mentioned earlier, if you would like to see the reports that we ran for your contracts, just shoot us a note. Happy to share. And I guess stay tuned for number 3, the part 3. We're going to just hit on some of the questions that we've been getting more nuanced around this. So See you there.
Yeah.
It'll be a fun one, so don't miss it.
Oh yeah.
All right. So welcome back to this episode of Rising Stars. This is part 3. So part 1, we kind of talked about what is this whole Clover thing? How do we think about it? Part 2, we dove into the numbers. What does this mean if this goes more broadly from an industry standpoint? And now this part is, all right, so what do we do about it? And it's also a little bit of scenario evaluation, because reality is none of us really know what's going to ultimately play out here. And so, a lot of this is just conjecture and thinking. And I actually shared one of my initial thoughts in part 1 about what I thought could happen, similar to Stars 2024. I thought maybe CMS just accepts it to avoid a bunch of lawsuits and goes right into a better of. And Jessica quickly put me in my place and told me to stay in my numbers lane and why that was not likely.
I wouldn't say it that way.
So with that, I'll throw out one, because I've been talking about another potential change for years and years now. What's the likelihood, Jessica, that the QI hold harmless change now comes into play, in conjunction with some of these changes?
Yeah. So, I mean, really, without our, let me just see here. What's the likelihood? I think there's it might be a high likelihood. I don't know what you guys think, but I think CMS intentionally put this on the codification runway, right? Which was part of the Clover lawsuit, that for those other 10 set of measures that they challenged CMS didn't do that. CMS did this with the hold harmless, moving that up to the 5 stars. And I think they've kind of had that intentionally in their back pocket all these years for scenarios like this, right? Or scenarios where things aren't quite playing out the way they need them to from a star ratings and financial and QBP perspective. So my read in the crystal ball would be like, that's a likely scenario that we may see come into play.
Yeah.
You guys agree?
Fair enough. Yeah. And we are going to do kind of a boom, boom, boom.
Rapid fire.
Rapid fire.
Area. So
likely,
go ahead.
unlikely. I agree. You keep poking the bear, it's going to turn around.
That's right.
It's going to turn around. So yeah, likely, unlikely. We're going to put Jessica on the spot for a little bit. We want her kind of take on
I feel like
whether
this is
some things
from part 1.
are likely or not likely to happen. And again, this is just all, at this point, it's all, personal feelings of what's going to happen. And actually, if you ask all the AI tools out there, they actually give it a 50 to 60% chance that this likely survives appeal process in some sort of way. So it does sound like there's a pretty good chance there's going to be some changes. So Mick already hit hold harmless, likely or not likely. Let's talk about Part D QI, because if they remove 20 measures, the only measures in Part D QI are complaints, members choosing to leave, that's going away anyways, and then MPF. So, at that point, likely or unlikely that Part D QI goes away. What do you think?
Oh, I think very likely that Part D QI goes away. I can't see how it would stand. In fact, I would think that Part D measures would go away altogether. I think that we would see a program moving forward that is HEDIS, HOS, and CAHPS Part C measures, and that would make up the STAR schema. Would I like there to be a Part D QI based on one measure? I don't know. I guess it depends on how much I improve that one measure. Especially if it held the same weight as Part C QI. But based on all I've just said, I see that going away. In addition to the Part D side, should this move forward with removal of those 10 measures?
Awesome. All right. Likely or unlikely that more health plans. We talked about in the second segment about these measures, they definitely kind of seemed picked, for a certain reason. Likely or unlikely that, other plans file suit with different measures, but also kind of 2 parts. Does CMS just entirely look at, say the measures that didn't follow the notice and comment and just remove those, altogether to not face dozens of lawsuits.
Yeah. Okay. That's kind of, that question is kind of twofold.
It is.
Yeah. I think, for the reasons we stated, and it was either part 1 or 2, CMS is not likely just to go back and apply it just to make this be quiet and go away, because it actually, either scenario opens an entire can of worms for CMS. Go back and watch those episodes if you want to know more about the worms. So that's my answer to the part 2 part of that. Part 1, what was the part 1 again? I got stuck on the worms. I was
that other health plans end up filing lawsuits with different measures.
That other health plan, yeah. Guys, I'm in my 50s. It only stays for so long. The chance that other health plans, I think that chance is strong. I think health plans are watching, particularly some of the larger health plans with deeper pockets and more money at stake and more money at hand to fund litigation. I think that's likely to move forward. I think everyone's watching very closely for that reason, to see how this plays out. Like we mentioned before, CMS did challenge that, and that didn't hold up. They have not filed a formal appeal, and that's really what most of us are watching for right now. Is CMS going to file appeal? If so, is that going to be successful? Will it apply to 20, to 10? So there's so many what-if scenarios out there, but yeah. I do see other plans bringing forward their own cherry-picked measures.
Yeah, it's almost like what's going to make it easier on CMS, right? Face dozens of lawsuits or just reevaluate all the measures and how they were put into the program. So what we wanted to do next is kind of collaboratively talk about, if I'm a health plan, what do I do? Like, what is, yes, we see the lawsuit, we know the impact it could have. But what do I do? Like, and Jessica, we can start with you, and Mick and I can then chime in. But if I'm a smaller health plan, or maybe even a larger health plan, do I watch this? Do I dedicate resources to it? Do I change my, 2027, 2028, 2029 strategy? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. I think regardless of whether you are a small or large health plan, you need to understand the mathematical impact to the removal of 10, to the removal of 20. And you need to have your plan A is, we're working the measures we have now under the rules of the program as we understand it now, and the rules of the program that have been codified already for star year 28 and 29, i.e. removal of those operational measures. So you need to have that as your plan A, but you definitely need to do the math and understand what that means for all your contracts at 10 and 20. And you need to have a mathematical pathway and plan and strategy in the back of your mind on tab 2 of your star ratings work plan, ready to implement for sure. If you're a small health plan, pulling your 1 or 2 data guys, people, women, whomever, out of doing the work they need to do every day to help you compete with maybe some of the bigger players and other folks in your industry is not a good idea. I recommend you lean into somebody, or even a mid-sized plan, lean into a vendor, a friend, phone a friend, get someone to help you do that math for you, but you need to understand that now. If you're a bigger plan, maybe you have the giant data teams needed to do that. I don't know, but that's my take.
Well, what's your take, Phil?
I mean, I don't want Jessica to publicly disagree with me, so I'm gonna. No,
I won't.
No, I totally agree with that. Live in the what we know and not the what if, right? Like, be prepared for the what if, but don't sacrifice what we know right now, what is the program, over something that hasn't even gone through an appeals court yet. So totally agree, and again, you could definitely map out these what ifs and, have, those scenarios at the ready for if that decision comes down. But,
Right.
Again, I think live in the what we know, not the what if.
Yeah, that's where my head is just kind of track all this stuff, understand your numbers, understand what these changes that we know today, how they impact your plan, and just be ready to kind of bring the team together once it finally gets announced and we have the final rules. And now, how do we adapt to that? How do we look at our current performance and optimize that based on now what we know is the new reality? And with all that said, again, we've run the numbers for every contract out there. So if you want us to share the data we've already run, just reach out, client or not, doesn't matter. But thank you guys, Phil and Jessica, for the time here. I think this was a fun session.
Very fun.
Agree.
Yep. We'll be watching the news along with you all.